The bridge of the fleet battlecruiser Retribution hummed with the quiet efficiency of a well-trained crew. Commander Eva Rostova stood at the viewport, her reflection ghosting against the star-speckled void of space. At 46, her face had been weathered by service, her blonde hair cropped short for practicality, but it was her eyes that revealed the most, steel blue and penetrating, carrying a weariness that belied her military bearing while concealing a spark of ferocity few had witnessed unleashed. "Status report," she said, voice cutting through the ambient sounds of the bridge without being raised. Lieutenant Cade Mercer responded promptly. "Standard patrol parameters, Commander. We're approaching the outer markers of the Cygnus X-1 sector. All systems nominal." Rostova nodded, her gaze shifting to the holographic display of their current sector. The Cygnus border represented the furthest reach of explored human space, a frontier where humanity's expansion met the unknown. Her attention lingered on the pulsing blue indicator representing Viridia 7, affectionately known throughout the fleet as the Cradle Colony. "Open a routine communication channel to Viridia 7, she ordered. "Standard check-in protocol." Moments later, the main view screen filled with the warm glow of Viridia's twin suns setting over rolling fields of bioluminescent wheat. The transmission came from one of the colony's community centers, where families had gathered for an evening meal. Children darted between tables, their laughter carrying clearly through the speakers. The colony's governor, Elias Harlow, a robust man with laugh lines etched deeply around his eyes, smiled broadly. "Commander Rostova, to what do we owe the pleasure of fleet attention? All's well on the Cradle, as you can see." The corner of Rostova's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Standard check-in, Governor. How's the growing season? Bountiful beyond projections. This planet wants to sustain life, Commander. Third-generation births are up 17% from last quarter. We're raising the future out here." Behind him, a small girl with copper-colored pigtails waved enthusiastically at the camera before being swept up by her father. Something in Rostova's expression softened momentarily. "Keep them safe, Governor," she said, the formulaic farewell carrying an undercurrent of genuine feeling. "Always do, Commander." Viridia out. As the screen faded to the star field, Rostova found herself momentarily transported to another time. Another first contact that had ended very differently. 7 years earlier, she had stood in the sterile confines of a diplomatic vessel, watching with measured horror as Vex drones methodically dissected a living specimen from a peaceful, spacefaring species. The Vex, chitinous insectoids with complex hive structures and ruthless biological imperatives, had shown neither malice nor remorse. They had simply cataloged, sampled, and discarded, treating sentient life as nothing more than biomaterial to be processed. She had stepped forward then, breaking protocol to address the towering hive coordinator directly, its compound eyes reflecting her image in fractured repetition. "Your understanding of value is flawed," she had said, voice steady despite the tension coiling through her spine. "To humans, not all life carries equal weight. Touch what humanity cherishes most, our young, and your existence will become a fleeting regret." The coordinator had tilted its armored head, mandibles clicking in what the translators interpreted as dismissal. Biological imperative supersedes symbolic valuation. Resource acquisition follows efficiency parameters. Categorization of biomass by emotional quotient is illogical. The memory dissolved as Lieutenant Mercer called out sharply from his station. "Commander, emergency frequencies lighting up from Viridia 7. Rostova snapped back to the present. On screen, full analysis. The view screen flickered, displaying fragmented data bursts. The images were chaotic, shaking, clearly taken during some catastrophic event. Fires blazed through what had been pristine fields. Colonists ran in terror as massive, segmented forms moved with predatory precision through the settlements. The audio came in distorted waves, screams, the distinctive chittering of Vex communication, and worst of all, the high-pitched cries of children. Rostova's fingers dug into the command chair's armrests as the fragments assembled into horrifying clarity. Vex drones dragging small, struggling forms toward pulsating organic structures that had been erected where schools and nurseries had stood hours earlier. A final transmission cut through the chaos, a Vex communication translated into flat, mechanical standard. Biomass units undergoing processing. Resource-rich environment secured. Elder units resistant. Juvenile units optimal for repurposing. Request additional harvesters for maximum efficiency. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. When Rostova spoke, her voice had transformed into something barely recognizable, a glacial tone that seemed to lower the temperature on the bridge. Battle stations. Plot immediate jump trajectory to Viridia 7. Bypass standard protocols. First Officer Doran Ishida stepped forward, concern evident in his expression. Commander, regulations require we await. Regulations don't apply when the cradle is being desecrated. Rostova cut him off, her eyes now burning with that hidden spark fully ignited. Transmit to Sector Command. Retribution is en route to Viridia 7. Vex incursion confirmed. Civilian casualties reported. Request immediate backup. Her hand closed around the ceremonial knife at her belt, a reminder of that first, failed diplomatic mission. Then prepare all combat systems. We're going in hot. Distance to Viridia, she demanded. 4 hours at emergency jump protocols, Mercer responded. Make it 3, Rostova ordered as she settled into her command chair. Retribution is en route. Out. The battlecruiser's engines howled as they tore a hole through space, racing toward the silent colony. The Retribution dropped out of jump space at the edge of the Viridia system, emerging into a scene of nightmare. The view screen automatically dimmed to compensate for the sudden flare of weapons fire and burning debris. Viridia's orbital space crawled with Vex bio ships, massive, pulsating hive vessels resembling monstrous insects scaled to impossible proportions. Surrounding them were clouds of smaller fighter drones, moving in the perfect synchronization that made Vex swarm tactics so lethal. The once pristine colony world below was visibly scarred even from orbit, large portions of its surface now covered in the sickly bioluminescent growth characteristic of Vex infestation. Tactical assessment, Rostova demanded, her voice unnaturally calm. Tactical Officer Ramirez swallowed visibly before responding. 17 Vex hive ships detected. Fighter drone numbers. Incalculable. Thousands at minimum. Surface scans show major population centers overrun. Vex biostructures have replaced or consumed approximately 60% of human settlements. Rostova's eyes narrowed. Life signs. Communications Officer Park shook her head, eyes glistening. Scattered human signatures, Commander. Weak and fluctuating. But there's something else. Intense energy signatures pulsing from specific locations. Identify those locations. A pause. Cross-referencing with colony maps. They're centered on what were schools, nurseries, and community centers. The bridge fell silent. Rostova rose slowly from her command chair, every muscle taut with controlled fury. They're harvesting the children, she said, each word falling like a shard of ice. Confirm high-value targets. I want firing solutions on hive coordinators. Break their command structure. First Officer Ishida moved to her side. Commander, we're severely outnumbered. Standard protocol would be to weapons free, Rostova ordered, cutting him off. Target the nearest hive coordinator and fire everything we have. The Retribution shuddered as its main batteries unleashed a devastating barrage at the closest Vex hive ship. The massive vessel's outer chitinous armor buckled under the assault, spewing a sickly yellow fluid into space. Before the crew could celebrate this small victory, the view screen filled with the approaching swarm of Vex fighter drones, moving like a living cloud toward the battlecruiser. Evasive maneuvers, Rostova commanded. Use that debris field for cover. Point defense systems. Concentrate on breach prevention. What followed was chaos barely contained by Rostova's tactical brilliance. The Retribution dove and weaved through the debris of destroyed orbital installations, using the wreckage as shields against the Vex's corrosive bioplasma weapons. Fighter drones crashed against the hull by the dozens, some exploding on impact, others attempting to burn through with acidic secretions. Rostova remained standing, calling out precise, targeting orders even as the ship shuddered and alarms wailed. Target that nerve cluster structure on the second hive ship. Full power to forward shields. Rotate ship axis to distribute damage. Beneath the cacophony of battle, Officer Park called out in alarm. Commander, surface signals are intensifying. The energy signatures at the former colonial schools are spiking dramatically. They're accelerating whatever they're doing, Ramirez added grimly. Probably because we've arrived. A massive impact rocked the ship, throwing several crew members from their stations. Ramirez's console exploded in a shower of sparks, the blast catching him full in the face. He dropped without a sound, his body smoking. Medical to the bridge, Ishida shouted, but Rostova's focus never wavered. Continue firing sequence. Target the third hive. Ship's propulsion sacks. The battle continued for 20 brutal minutes. The Retribution suffered significant damage. Hull breaches on 3 decks, fires in engineering, weapons systems operating at reduced capacity. But Rostova's relentless assault had created a narrow corridor through the Vex blockade, disabling one hive ship completely and crippling 2 others. Status on fleet reinforcements? Rostova demanded. Admiral Kwan reports lead elements 18 hours out at emergency speeds. Park responded. Rostova's expression hardened further as she studied the tactical display showing the intensifying energy signatures on the planet's surface. Those children don't have 18 hours, she said quietly, then raised her voice. Prepare Marine insertion pods. We're going groundside. Ishida's protest was immediate. Commander, with respect, that's suicide. We barely survived the orbital engagement. Ground insertion against Vex swarm tactics. I'm leading Strike Team Alpha. Rostova continued, as if he hadn't spoken. You have command of the Retribution, First Officer. Maintain orbital position and provide what cover you can. Commander, Rostova turned to him, her eyes burning with a cold fire that silenced further objection. They ignored our warning, Doran. Now they face the consequences directly. Gear up. We deploy in 30 minutes. The Marine drop pod screamed through Viridia's atmosphere, trailing smoke as they dodged anti-aircraft fire from Vec bioturrets. Of the 12 pods launched, 10 made it to the surface intact, crashing into the outskirts of what had once been New Haven, the colony's capital. Rostova emerged from her pod, pulse rifle raised, scanning her surroundings with practiced efficiency. The air tasted wrong, thick with alien spores and the stench of decomposition. What had been a thriving city was now a nightmarish landscape of half-consumed buildings covered in pulsating Vex resin and bioluminescent webbing. The streets were eerily silent except for the distant chittering of Vex drones and, occasionally, human screams. Form up, she ordered as the surviving Marines assembled. 28 men and women in powered combat armor, faces grim behind their visors. Comms check. Captain Alvarez, Team B ready. Lieutenant Zhang, Team C ready. Team A with me, Rostova confirmed. Mission parameters. We move directly to the Central Children's Institute. Intelligence suggests it's been converted to a primary processing center. Rescue any survivors, gather intelligence on Vex operations, then exfil for orbital strike. Questions? There were none. These were veteran Marines who understood exactly what they faced and why they might not return. Move out. Standard swarm formation. They advanced cautiously through the alien landscape, encountering the first signs of the colonists' desperate resistance. Abandoned weapons, blast marks on walls, barricades hastily constructed, then overwhelmed. Skeletal remains lay partially absorbed by the creeping Vex growth, biological material being efficiently recycled. The first contact came suddenly, a pack of skitterlings, small Vex drones used primarily for reconnaissance, scuttling along building facades and dropping onto the Marines from above. Despite their diminutive size, their mandibles could slice through standard armor at the joints. "Contact!" shouted Corporal Durand as he fired upward, catching a skitterling mid-leap. The creature exploded in a spray of yellow ichor. The quiet was shattered by gunfire as the Marines defended against the ambush. Rostova moved with surprising agility for a ship commander, her sidearm barking precisely as she dropped 3 skitterlings in quick succession. "They're spotters," she called out. "Larger units incoming." No sooner had she spoken than the real attack began. Vex warrior drones, each standing over 2 meters tall, with razor-sharp limbs and chitinous armor, surged from side streets and burst from within infested buildings. They moved with terrifying speed, some charging directly into Marine fire, others circling to flank. "Concentrated fire. Target joint sections," Rostova ordered, switching to her pulse rifle. The weapon's heavy thuds punctuated her commands as she methodically dropped advancing warriors. The Marines fought with disciplined precision, but the Vex numbers seemed endless. Private Kashino screamed as a warrior drone pinned him against a wall, mandibles tearing through his helmet. Sergeant Watts was dragged into a resin-covered building before anyone could react. "Push forward," Rostova commanded. "We can't get bogged down here." They fought their way through 3 more ambushes, their numbers dwindling with each engagement. By the time they reached the outskirts of the Institute complex, only 19 Marines remained operational. The massive building that had once served as Viridia's premier educational facility for children now pulsed with unholy light, its architecture grotesquely altered by Vex bioengineering. Massive organic tubes connected it to smaller structures, pumping unknown fluids between them. "Life signs?" Rostova asked quietly. Lieutenant Zhang consulted her scanner. Multiple human signatures inside. Weak, scattered. And something else. Something big. Rostova nodded grimly. "Breach pattern Delta. Teams B and C secure the perimeter. Team A with me on point." They blasted through what had once been the Institute's main entrance, now sealed with a membranous growth. The interior was worse than anything they had seen outside. Corridors restructured with organic material, pulsating light emanating from bulbous growths on the walls, the floor slick with unknown secretions. And the sounds, machinery whirring, fluid pumping, and underneath it all, barely audible whimpering. "Follow the life signs," Rostova ordered, her voice tight with controlled rage. They moved deeper into the transformed building, encountering surprisingly little resistance until they reached what scanner data indicated had been the Institute's central atrium. Lieutenant Davis placed breaching charges on the sealed organic doorway, and on Rostova's signal, detonated them. The horror that greeted them as they stormed through would haunt them forever. The vast chamber had been converted into what could only be described as a harvest center. Rows upon rows of transparent containment pods lined the walls, connected to pulsating organic machinery by tubes and cables. Inside each pod was a child. Some were clearly dead, their small bodies partially dissolved or serving as hosts for Vex larvae that writhed beneath their skin. Others were alive, but undergoing grotesque transformation. Limbs being methodically replaced with chitinous Vex appendages, eyes removed to make way for compound structures, spinal columns fused with alien technology. Many were suspended in nutrient fluids, their essence being slowly extracted while they remained conscious, faces frozen in silent screams. Even the hardened Marines faltered at the sight. One turned away to vomit inside his helmet. Another dropped to her knees, weapon forgotten. Rostova alone seemed able to move, her face carved from stone as she approached the nearest pod containing a small boy, perhaps 6 years old, still relatively intact compared to the others. His eyes widened in recognition of another human, hands pressing weakly against the transparent barrier. "Get them out," she ordered, voice hardly more than a whisper. "All of them. Now." The Marines shook off their horror and moved to comply, using cutting tools to carefully breach the pods containing children who might still be saved. Most were too far gone, fused with Vex biomatter beyond any hope of separation. But in a recessed alcove at the far end of the chamber, they discovered a small group of children, perhaps 10 in total, huddled together behind a partially processed nutrient tank, guarded by a single, seemingly confused Vex drone. Captain Alvarez eliminated the drone with a silent shot to its nerve cluster before it could raise an alarm. The children, ranging from perhaps 4 to 12 years old, stared at their rescuers with hollow, traumatized eyes. "We're going to get you out," Rostova told them, kneeling to eye level with the smallest, a girl with matted blonde hair clutching a filthy stuffed rabbit. "I'm Commander Rostova of the fleet. We're here to take you home." The girl simply stared back, beyond tears or hope. A harsh, keening alarm suddenly shrieked through the complex. The organic walls themselves seemed to pulse in response. "They know we're here," Lieutenant Zhang warned, checking her scanner. "Multiple hostiles converging on our position." "Prepare for extraction," Rostova ordered, rising. "Team B, secure these children for transport. Team C, establish a defensive perimeter. Team A with me. We're setting charges on that processing equipment." They had just begun placing explosives when the far wall of the chamber burst inward. What emerged could only be described as a Vex in its highest form. A massive, grotesquely elegant creature combining the worst aspects of insect and reptile. Standing nearly 4 meters tall, with an armored carapace glistening wetly under the bioluminescent light, it surveyed the humans through multifaceted eyes that reflected their images in dozens of tiny mirrors. "A brood queen," Rostova breathed, recognizing the creature from classified intelligence reports. Behind the queen came a wave of elite warrior drones, larger and more heavily armored than those they had encountered outside. "Fall back to the children," Rostova shouted as she opened fire on the queen. Her pulse rifle rounds sparked harmlessly off the creature's armor. The chamber erupted into chaos. Marines formed a protective cordon around the rescued children while exchanging fire with the warrior drones. The queen directed the assault with terrifying intelligence, coordinating her forces to cut off escape routes and using the environment itself as a weapon, causing resin walls to secrete acidic compounds or floor sections to suddenly become adhesive traps. "We need an exit," Captain Alvarez shouted over the cacophony. Rostova, firing steadily from behind a partially melted desk, assessed their dwindling options. "South corridor. It leads toward the landing zone. Zhang, use your remaining charges to clear the path." They began a fighting retreat, Marines falling one by one to buy time for their comrades and the children. Lieutenant Zhang used her demolition charges to collapse a portion of ceiling on pursuing drones. Corporal Durand was dragged screaming into a pulsating wall growth, his armor dissolving before their eyes. Halfway to the south exit, a warrior drone broke through their defensive line, its barbed limb raking across Rostova's side, tearing through her combat suit. She staggered, but remained upright, emptying her sidearm into the creature's face at point-blank range. "Commander's hit," shouted Private Santos, moving to support her. "Keep moving," Rostova ordered through gritted teeth, pressing a hand to her bleeding side. "The mission isn't over until those children are safe." They fought their way through 3 more ambush points, ammunition running critically low. Marines resorted to using captured Vex bioweapons, turning the aliens' own acidic compounds and explosive spores against them. Private Santos rigged his power pack to overload, buying the retreating group precious minutes with a sacrifice. Just as they neared the exit, the brood queen intercepted them, dropping from an overhead vent shaft directly into their path. The remaining Marines formed a last defensive line before the terrified children as the queen advanced, mandibles clicking in what almost sounded like anticipation. "Get them out," Rostova ordered Captain Alvarez, the last surviving officer besides herself. "Continue to the extraction point. I'll hold her here." "Commander." "That's an order, Captain. Complete the mission." As Alvarez reluctantly led the remaining Marines and children toward the exit, Rostova faced the Brood Queen alone. Blood soaked her side, but her stance was steady, eyes locked on the creature that represented everything humanity had warned against. The Queen tilted her massive head, compound eyes focusing on this lone human who dared to stand against her. When she spoke, it was through some biological mechanism that approximated human speech, a clicking, buzzing approximation of standard. You fail. Young. Optimal biomass. Processing. Continues. Rostova's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. You were warned. You should have listened. The Queen charged with explosive speed. Rostova dropped and rolled, drawing the ceremonial knife from her belt, the same one she had carried since that first diplomatic mission. As the Queen's momentum carried her forward, Rostova identified what intelligence reports had suggested was a vulnerability, a cluster of nerve connections at the base of the Queen's thorax, less heavily armored than the rest of her body. With every ounce of strength remaining, Rostova drove the knife deep into the nerve cluster. The Queen's screech was deafening, her massive body convulsing. Rostova twisted the blade, driving it deeper as the creature's acidic blood sprayed across her armor, eating through the protective plating. The Queen's death throes sent her crashing through walls and equipment. Rostova was thrown clear, landing hard against a processing tank. Through blurred vision, she saw the Queen's body twitch and then still, a psychic shockwave seeming to emanate from the fallen monarch. Throughout the complex, the coordinated Vex assault faltered. Drones stumbled, suddenly directionless, without the Queen's controlling influence. Some turned on each other in confusion. Rostova dragged herself to her feet, retrieving her knife from the Queen's corpse. She activated her comm unit. Alvarez status? We've reached the outer perimeter, Commander. 8 children secured. 4 Marines operational. Request immediate extraction. Incoming, Rostova confirmed, limping toward the exit. And, Captain, alert retribution. Tell them to prepare orbital bombardment protocols. Full planetary cleansing. By the time Rostova reached the extraction point, the first wave of fleet reinforcements had arrived in orbit. Admiral Kwan's flagship, the Adamant, led a battle group that quickly engaged the disorganized Vex biofleet. A medical officer attempted to treat Rostova's wounds as they boarded the evacuation shuttle, but she brushed them aside, her attention fixed on the terrified children being carefully secured for transport. The smallest girl still clutched her filthy rabbit, eyes vacant. As the shuttle lifted off, Rostova looked down at the infested landscape below, a beautiful world transformed into a monument to atrocity. She activated her command channel to the newly arrived flagship. Admiral Kwan, this is Commander Rostova. Request immediate implementation of planetary cleansing protocol Omega. No Vex leaves this world alive. The Admiral's response came after a momentary pause. Cleansing protocol confirmed, Commander. May I ask what you found down there? Rostova looked at the traumatized children, then the barren wasteland that had once been called the Cradle Colony. Something that must never happen again, she replied. Burn it all. The systematic cleansing of Iridia 7 took 3 days. Fleet ships established orbital dominance within hours, destroying the remaining Vex biofleet. Then the ground operation began, dropships deploying heavily armored troops with incendiary weapons, methodically burning out every trace of Vex infestation. Orbital bombardment targeted major hive concentrations, turning vast swathes of countryside into glass. Special units were assigned to the processing centers, ensuring every trace of the horrific experiments was incinerated, a necessary but soul-scarring task. Rostova, her wounds treated but refusing sedation, oversaw the operation from Admiral Kwan's command center. Her face remained an unreadable mask as reports flowed in. Casualty counts, destruction assessments, confirmation of hive eliminations. She reviewed the identification of fallen Marines personally, writing individualized messages to their families. Fleet psychologists worked around the clock with a handful of rescued children, but initial reports were grim. The trauma they had endured might never fully heal. The smallest girl, now identified as Lily Hayes, age 5, had yet to speak a single word since a rescue. On the third day, after Viridia 7 was officially declared sanitized, Rostova requested a shuttle to the surface. Admiral Kwan accompanied her despite his misgivings about her still healing injuries. They stood together on a ridge overlooking what had been New Haven. Nothing remained but scorched earth and the skeletal remnants of buildings. Viridia 7 was effectively dead, a beautiful world reduced to a monument of Vex atrocity and human retribution. "We should have been faster," Rostova said quietly, breaking a long silence. Admiral Kwan shook his head. No one could have predicted this. The Vex have never struck this deep into human territory before. "I predicted it," Rostova corrected him. 7 years ago, when I warned them directly about the consequences of harming human children. They dismissed it as emotional irrationality. Her eyes scanned the desolate landscape. "They understand now." Upon returning to the Adamant, Rostova sequestered herself in the communications center. For hours, she compiled a comprehensive data package, recordings of Viridia 7 before the attack, the fragmented distress calls, sensor logs, and visual recording from inside the nursery, footage of the Vex Brood Queen, her original warning from years ago, and finally stark, unedited footage of the planetary cleansing, the Vex being systematically burned out and eradicated. When she emerged, Admiral Kwan was waiting. "The psychological assessment team has requested you speak with them regarding your experiences groundside. Standard protocol after. Transmit this package on all fleet channels," Rostova interrupted, handing him a data crystal. "Broadcast openly across explored space. No censorship, no sanitization." The Admiral frowned. "Commander, some of this footage." "All of it, Admiral," she insisted. "Every species, every civilization needs to see exactly what the Vex did here, and exactly what happened to them as a result." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "As you wish, Commander." The data package was transmitted as ordered, spreading across human space and beyond to allied and neutral species. Accompanying it was a simple voice message recorded by Rostova herself, her tone cold and clear. "To all species, all civilizations listening. Years ago, we delivered a warning to the Vex swarm. They chose not to listen. They violated the sanctity of a human cradle. They harmed our children. What happened on Viridia 7 is not vengeance. It is a statement of consequence. We warn them. Harm a human child, and you won't live to regret it. Let the fate of the Vex on Viridia serve as the only example the rest of you will ever need." 2 weeks later, the Retribution, repairs completed, prepared to depart Admiral Kwan's battle group. Before leaving, Rostova visited the medical frigate where the rescued children were still receiving treatment. Dr. Eleanor Patel, the lead physician, met her outside the observation room. "They're making progress, Commander. Slow but measurable." Through the one-way glass, Rostova could see the children engaged in various therapeutic activities. All except one. Lily Hayes sat alone in a corner, still clutching her rabbit, staring at nothing. "And the little one?" Dr. Patel sighed. "Lily's case is challenging. She hasn't spoken since rescue. She witnessed things no child should ever see. Her parents were processed in front of her." Rostova's jaw tightened. "May I speak with her?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Briefly. "Don't expect a response." Lily didn't look up when Rostova entered and sat beside her. For several minutes, they sat in silence. "I had a rabbit like that when I was your age," Rostova finally said. "Mine was called Hoppy. Not very original, I know." Lily's fingers tightened on the toy, but she gave no other indication she'd heard. "I want you to know something, Lily," Rostova continued. "The monsters who hurt you and your friends, they're gone. All of them. They can never hurt anyone again." For the first time, Lily's vacant gaze shifted slightly toward Rostova. "Sometimes we meet monsters in our lives," Rostova said softly. "But you need to remember, humans are stronger than monsters. Always." She rose to leave, having said what she came to say. As she reached the door, a tiny voice spoke behind her. "Did you kill them all?" Rostova turned back. Lily was looking directly at her now, eyes suddenly focused. "Yes," Rostova answered honestly. "Every last one." The girl nodded once, then returned to her silence. Later, on the Retribution's bridge, First Officer Ishida approached his commander as she studied star charts at her station. "Orders, Commander?" Rostova's finger traced a path through unexplored space, towards systems where intelligence suggested Vex activity might be found. "Plot a course to the Arcturus sector," she said. "We have patrol duties to resume." "The crew is ready," Ishida confirmed. "Many have requested permanent assignment to the Retribution after what happened at Viridia." Rostova nodded. "They want to make sure it never happens again." "So do I." As the Retribution prepared to jump, Rostova stood at the viewport. Her reflection ghosted against the stars. The ship's name seemed more fitting now than ever before, not as a promise of vengeance, but as a guarantee of consequence. The warning had been delivered, written in the ashes of Viridia 7. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's response when its children were threatened. The question that remained, the question that kept Rostova's gaze fixed on the darkness between stars, was who else might need to learn this lesson, and how soon. "Jump when ready," she ordered, eyes like chips of ice. The Retribution, scarred but unbowed, leapt into the void, carrying its message to the stars.